Hello everyone. I'm delighted to be here and absolutely honored that you came to listen to me today while you go about your walk or your work. It's been very cold here and I don't know what it would be in Celsius, but it's been 30 degrees and that's below freezing here in the US. And so I went outside and did my little Jane Austen walk with my waterproof boots and a big coat, and just to listen to the crunch beneath my feet. But as you know, I grew up on a homestead in Alaska and endured very long winters, very cold winters, and so I'm just happy for it to be here. One day I'll go out and hear the crunch and then come in and it has to go. I'm not interested in living that life again. It was just so, it was a hard life. And so, ladies, today I would like to welcome you to Homemakers Radio. Welcome to the manse. And everything is dark outside, so I can't show you the snow, but I want to show you something before you go to get ready for this great responsibility at home, this glorious place that you're going to make it so that you'll be happy and everyone else will be happy. I'm going to share my teacup with you, and it's one of those Grace's teaware. Comes from Home Goods and other reject stores that it's brand new merchandise, but maybe last year's, something like that. And it there's two kinds. There's Gracie's fine bone china, and there's Grace's teaware. This is Grace's teaware. I don't know if they're the same people or not, but I chose it because it goes with my sparkly black sweater. And I wanted to show you the back of this because I got it years ago at one of those big box stores, and I just wanted to show you the back of it. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a velvet ribbon in it going down the back. And today I also wanted to share with you something that I got from Imperfect Foods. And it's from Washington State, Blaine, Washington, and it's called Steel Cut Oats. Now, I had never tried these before. I never really cared for oatmeal that much, and I wasn't always very happy with the way that it worked in baking the oats. But these are cut into a finer grain, and I made some hot oatmeal to eat, and I never have liked it very much, but these were delicious. And so I want to show you what it looked like on there. And they mix so well into breads and other things, cookies, and I like them so much better than the other kind. And these are from a family farm somewhere. So I just wanted to tell you about this. They are expensive. Like, you could get one of these, this size, at a grocery store for a little over $2 or $1, but they're $5 at Imperfect Foods. Perfectly worth the price. And you know, we need to decide, ladies, as homemakers, that we could probably cut down on a lot of things. We could probably scrimp on a lot of things. We could probably go cheap on a lot of things, but we should never go cheap on the food. And because that's going to keep us strong and healthy, and also help us to have good, positive minds. And people should sit down to a meal and be excited about the food. That's why they like to go to restaurants. It's exciting. And so they shouldn't be eating things just because you bought them cheaply, or they are of an inferior quality. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Also, I mentioned tisane, which is a tea. I mean, I call these things a tea, but yesterday when I was reading the Jane Austen book, The Jane Austen Diet by Brian Kozlowski, and it mentioned tea, it isn't always talking about the black tea. A lot of people don't like the black tea, which is from the camellia plant, and a tisane is different. That's where you take dried fruit or mint leaves and you put them in hot water and you call it a tea. So many times when I talk about tea, I'm not talking about black tea. I know that's pretty hard to take for some people, and some of it doesn't taste good at all. If I drink a black tea, I'll be drinking Yorkshire Gold because it's got a beautiful golden flavor, and it doesn't have the tannic acid in it as much. So I wanted to show you this one that I got from the Republic of Tea, and I ordered it, and it's called Milk Thistle. and it's seeds from the protection plant with orange peel and a touch of grapefruit. There's no tea in it. It's just got all these herbs, and when you smell it, it's very strongly grapefruit rind. And when you make it up, it's completely clear, but it's very healthful. Milk thistle, good for your liver, good for many other things. You can look that up. It's by Republic of Tea. Now, Republic of Tea also has one that I haven't been able to find that I'm curious about, which was plum pudding, I believe it was, that I'd like to try. Sometimes you can get these in specialty stores like the Whole Foods markets. And so I didn't bring the book by Brian Kozlowski to read today, but I was thinking about homemaking and why we need to have good minds for the home, why this is so important for the homemaker to be happy, to be relaxed, and to be non-worried, and how often over the years I'll look back. See, you're going to have to be careful because you don't want to have these memories where you look back and you see all the time you spent worrying about something when you could have been doing something for your family, for your children, or for your home. And there's no use worrying or spending a lot of mental time over the way the world is, because it won't help you get your dishes done. It won't help you clean out that back room. And so that's why when I go to do a job that, like Emma called it, a grim job to be done, when I go to do one of those grim jobs, I don't tune in to anything current because the world's not going to give me any hope. They're always up to something, aren't they? And they're just going to keep scrunching down on people till they just totally run out of ideas, I think. But of course, you know, the evil people, they wax worse and worse, don't they? And now we can afford to laugh at them a little bit because of their folly. And I'm sure the Lord in his heavens laughs at them too. So you also will give yourself more room in your mind to think more clearly, and you'll find out that the less running around you do, and the less worrying and paying attention to the media that you do, the more space you've got in your mind to think of things, creative things, and to connect things, to start thinking a little deeper instead of on the surface all the time. And that foggy thinking goes away. There'll be more room in your mind and more time in your life. And for instance, a homemaker versus someone who has to go out every day to be employed by someone else, she's going to have to work for a future that she plans for herself and for her family, whereas the person that works for a company or a corporation has to go and do what they say, and they will get the kind of retirement that is planned for them by this corporation. And so you have a lot more freedom as to what kind of future you're going to have if you're home. And you're also working for people that you love and you care about. You care about what they eat and what they do and what they think. And also, women at home determine a great deal as to how long people live and what kind of health they will be. And, you know, I think it is it in James where it says life and death are in the power of the tongue? The tongue. But in the home, life and death is in the power of truth, because truth is, like they say, a force to be reckoned with. And once your thinking is cleared up and you're not thinking about all the things that the media is feeding you, you start to recognize truth. And when people start to recognize truth, you can't fool them anymore. And your homemaking takes on a whole new light as to the direction that you're going to go with your thinking. And if your thinking improves, if you're free from thinking about what everybody else wants you to think about, your thinking improves, there's a lot you can do in the home. I've covered some of that, what you can do with your talents, how you can help your children, and how you can teach by the way you live, and learning more about things like nutrition and exercise, and learning about how to order your day, how much rest you need, learning about all these things about the way the body works, and teaching it all to your children. And so I wanted to say one more thing about homemaking. How many of you slump in your house? You're walking, even if you're walking through the house, you're going into the kitchen, do you slump? Because what that could be is a signal of discouragement. Or maybe by slumping, you become discouraged. I don't know, maybe the two just kind of wipe each other out. But practice not slumping in the home. Now, we noticed this in our family when we had been berated, or when people wanted to look down on us, or they wanted to intimidate us. We would respond to it by kind of cowering a little bit or slumping back. And I think Dickens did a lot of this description in some of his novels. There were some people that would just shrink, And so what I'd like for homemakers to do is to learn about posture, and learn about posture in their home, and how important the posture is for your dignity and to feel dignified. Now, that's one reason I think you should get up and get dressed and wear something nice. It's just for the dignity of it. And you will stand a little differently and not slump in the home. I think a lot of the slumping in the home is just the burden that it is. There's so much to do, and even if you assign it to everyone else, you're still responsible to control it and to monitor it, and you have to be the one that organizes it all. And it's easy to get up in the morning, walk into the kitchen, and just slump, because now it's time to prepare a meal, or it's time to, and then later on, time to clean it up, and it's easy to slump. Why don't we stop doing that? Now, one of the problems with modern posture, I've been looking at this on some of the videos that I see online for posture for women, and especially posture for women who've had an injury, or posture for women who have internal problems, or just posture. But we've been taught wrongly about posture when we were really young and in the public school, and they taught us to hold our shoulders back and squeeze in our abdomen and our waistline, and it's a very bad habit, and you can't get rid of it sometimes. So I'm learning how to breathe, how to relax, and how to stand naturally, and because that's the way soldiers stand, and they were trying to train us in these physical education classes with the military type of physical education, and the posture was just enough to give you a backache, because it was so unnatural for women. And one of the things I've learned is you stand in alignment with your hips and your waistline, and you don't stiffen up, and you have to make sure you don't lean forward, but you don't also pull back, and it's very, very natural. One of the problems I think that some of us who are a little taller deal with is that if everything is low, if the kitchen cabinets are low, if everything you do for your table, everything that you do at home is lower, you get in a bad habit of leaning forward or slumping all the time. But to practice, if you don't know how to exercise and you want to have a little exercise, just walk through your house without slumping, and just do that for 10 minutes. Just a nice little warm-up, back and forth, walk around if you don't want to go outside in inclement weather, and see how different it makes your mind function, how different it makes you feel. The tasks that you thought were daunting will suddenly you'll feel possibilities over it. Now, so you'll have more room in your mind. So I want to read, because I didn't get to bring the Jane Austen storybooks here to read to you, I want to read something about the city of Bath, the history of Bath. This is one beauty about me homeschooling you, is that you're going to learn how to use things that you have seen or read, and to expand them further and find out more deeply about them. For example, when my children were growing up, my daughter had the Jane Austen novels to read, and one of them was called Persuasion, and I believe it was about Bath. It had several chapters in there about visiting Bath, and then of course there was the 1990s movie that really portrayed this very nicely, and they went into a kind of a restaurant and they ordered water and from this place called Bath. So I wanted to read the history of it, because after we would read something like that, we'd say, I wonder what Bath was. I wonder what it is. And of course, people living in England already know, but we didn't. So we would look it up, what limited information we could get on it. We had an old set of encyclopedias and an old set of books about the world, and we got little bits of information about it. But now we have the internet. In fact, my children are always saying, I just wish we could just start over, because now we have the internet. We have all this information. Okay, so let me read to you about the city of Bath. Founded by the Romans as a thermal spa, Bath became an important center of the wool industry in the Middle Ages. In the 18th century, under George III, it developed into an elegant town with neoclassical Palladian buildings which blend harmoniously with the Roman baths. So I wanted to read more about it here. The Romans built the baths as part of a spa in the year 43 BC. They called it Aqua Sulis, which means the waters of Sulis. Bath became a city in 1585 when Queen Elizabeth I declared it to be one. Okay, so here's another question that you would ask if I were homeschooling you. I would expect you to ask this. I would expect you to wonder about it. What were the Romans doing in England in 43 BC? And then that would help you to find out what they did in England and where the Roman wall was and why it was built. And I always thought that the Roman wall was built to keep out those pesky Scots that wouldn't march in formation like respectable soldiers, and they jumped from trees. They were the first guerrilla warfare type people. And after not being able to defeat I believe it was the Picts, they, because, the people that drew pictures on their face, the original Scotties, and they couldn't defeat them, so they just built a wall and to keep them out. But you need to find out, what were they doing in England in 43 BC? That's another study you could go on. Now you have the internet, and you could go find out. So I wanted you to know about that and about Bath, and go ahead and watch the 1990s production of Persuasion. Beautiful. I wonder if it was filmed in Bath. I'm not sure, but it's just beautiful to watch, and keep your mind off of the stuff that's going on. And besides that, if you look at the life of Christ, and he only had 3 years of ministry, even though he had 33 years of life on this earth, he had 3 years of ministry. And the whole New Testament is about, the result of his ministry and his ministry. But it's interesting that if you get one of those timeline charts, or you find one online, or you get one of those ones that unfold and it shows when Jesus was in Galilee, who the rulers were and what the wars were that were going on, and it would go right in another line above his life. And then when Jesus was here, who were the rulers and what kind of war there was and everything. And the world was in a terrible turmoil. And if you read the Gospels, you'll find by the questions people were asking him, like when was he going to set up his kingdom, and was he going to get rid of their oppressors? You realize there was something going on, but those wars were never mentioned. And very few of the rulers, it would say in the year of, Tiberius Caesar or something like that, it would always tell you throughout the New Testament who these leaders were, but it wouldn't go into anything about all what they were doing so much, because I really think it's just marvelous that Christ wanted people to keep their mind on his kingdom and what he was doing, and it was very easy to get distracted. And so we have to mold our character around him and around the things that he taught. And so that's why I say pay attention to your own self. Isn't that what the Apostle Paul told the young preacher Timothy? Pay attention to yourself and to these things. They don't say pay attention to what the world is doing. The idea, of course, is that the soul that needs to be saved and corrected and refined. And I can't explain it any better than that. But this is the script that we should live by. And it's really hard, isn't it? You get together with some people and then they start talking about the stuff. They start talking about the disease, and they start talking about the medications, and they start, and it's just so, sometimes just turns my stomach when I get in a group that's like that, and I'll just kind of get up and walk around and try to get away from it and, act like I got a phone call or something because it's so dreary. And to ward people off, don't you remember from, was it Sense and Sensibility? Whenever Fanny didn't like the subject got too hot for her, she would say, tea. And Emma did the same thing. Oh, I see the tea is here. Let's go and have some. I think that is just even if you don't drink tea, give people something and some refreshment just as a distraction. And have some things around that you can have other subjects around that you can talk about that you can distract them with. And so now I want to also, I don't think this will be a very long video today. I've waited all day to come here. There was just one thing after the other that needed to be done. And let's see, I went and checked the mail and went for that crunchy walk in the snow. And I did my, what I call the movements, the stretch exercises and breathing exercises. And I also made up any of the beds that I had taken stuff off of to wash, and let's see, got the kitchen all cleaned up, cleaned the fridge, and I don't have my list here of all the things I did. No, I made a list. I think that, and I checked all of Mr. S's financial affairs to see if he had a cent left, and he didn't, but he wants to know, and I checked all that. I keep track of all that stuff, and let's see, I got some papers in order and made a nice list of all the groceries I need to get. I mean, that's making progress, isn't it? I asked my daughter once, "What did you do today?" And she said, "I made a list." So most of the time we're busy doing things that hired help would have done back in Jane Austen's day, so we don't really have time to do the other things that we'd like to do. But I want to also read to you, some of you who are thinking about what's wrong with modern education. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy. He's called John Taylor Gatto. December 15, 1935 to October 25, 2018. He was an author and he was a school teacher. And I want to talk to you about him because even if you don't have children, even if you live alone, even if you went to public school, I'm homeschooling you, and one thing that it will help you understand is what happened to you, why you think the way that you do, why you get discouraged, why you get depressed, the false way you might be looking at life, and how you can free yourself from it and be a little happier, maybe even be healthier and less tense. He was an American author and school teacher. After teaching for nearly 30 years, he authored several books on modern education, criticizing its ideology, history, and consequences. He's best known for his books, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling, and The Underground History of American Education, a school teacher's intimate investigation into the problem of modern schooling, which is sometimes considered to be his magnum opus. So now I want to give you some quotes by him, which you will find quite heavy. But I thought you might also want to look him up and study this. So here are some of his quotes. Now, I told you about school. It's from the German word Schul, which means spare time. It was during the Greeks invented it, but it was during a time when after work people could come and listen to someone that was on a speakeasy or, like one of those gazebos, and they would speak about history or science or philosophy, and people would come and listen. And that was just done in their spare time. And I always thought that's the way it should be, because the pioneer children after a day in the evening, they'd light the lamp, and then the parents would help them learn just the basics of education, just reading, writing, some history, a little bit of maybe the study of the earth, and other things and of course mathematics, and but then it became a really big thing where it took up so much time of a person's day that they are separated from their families most of the most receptive hours of the day, and the parents are separated from them too. But let's listen to what John Taylor Gatto said. When you take the free will out of education, that turns it into schooling. I've noticed a fascinating phenomenon in my 30 years of teaching. Schools and schooling are increasingly irrelevant to the great enterprises of the planet. Yes, my son wrote a book called The Forgotten Nation. It was a little booklet. And it was about, and he was only like 16 when he wrote it because he was homeschooled. And it was about how these schools they're all separated from the world, and the kids are all in there. They're locked in. You can't get any other information to them except what has been prescribed by the government, and they're not free to go out and enjoy the fresh air, the spring. It's like we've got all this snow. They should have been out sledding this week, not cooped up in a classroom, and they would learn. Their brains would be better off, and they would learn more that way. And just because they're sitting there 5 hours a day, or how many hours a day they're in there, to me it's child labor, unpaid child labor, because they have to get up so early and stay so late, and they're exhausted when they get home. And just because they're there 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day, does not guarantee that they absorbed everything that they were given. It's a very inefficient way, a very bad thing to do to children. And so no one believes anymore that scientists are trained in science classes, or politicians in civics classes, or poets in English classes. The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders. This is the great mystery to me, because thousands of humane, caring people work in schools as teachers and aides and administrators, but the abstract logic of the institution overwhelms their individual contributions. I always wondered why so many Christians could teach in those public schools, and yet it didn't make a bit of difference in the lives of those children. And you'd ask them, well, they would complain about the schools, and you'd ask them, well, can't you change anything? No, they couldn't, because the teachers were obeying orders too. They have a set prescribed curriculum that they have to follow. But with the schools needing help and needing teachers so much now, I imagine that a lot of you that are homeschooled could, or that know about homeschooling, could go in there and teach just the simplest stuff, and they'd be a lot better off with what you could teach them. Although teachers do care and do work very, very hard, the institution is psychopathic. It has no conscience. It rings a bell, and the young man in the middle of writing a poem must close his notebook and move to a different cell, where he must memorize that humans and monkeys derived from a common ancestor. Yes, that's another thing. We tried to really watch that in homeschooling. If they were absorbed in something, even if it was play, we didn't jolt them and interrupt them and get their attention suddenly. We let their minds go naturally, and the only time you really need to do that, get their attention, is if they're in danger, and if they need to come to you quickly. So listen to this, and I've said this before too, that children will be most like the people they are around. And so children learn what they live. Put kids in a class, and they will live out their lives in an invisible cage, isolated from their chance at community. Interrupt kids with bells and horns all the time, and they will learn that nothing is important or worth finishing. Ridicule them, and they will retreat from human association. Shame them, and they will find 100 ways to get even. The habits taught in large-scale organizations are deadly. Whatever an education is, I'm reading from John Taylor Gatto, it should make you a unique individual, not a conformist. You should practice something that many homeschoolers call delight learning. When you, just like when I was reading about Bath, okay, now we found out it was the Romans. Well, what were the Romans doing there? And you get so tickled thinking you found out something, you solved a mystery, and it's just delight learning, and that's the way it should always be presented. And of course, you'll have children that say, oh, I just love my teacher. But the thing is, they will love their teachers because the teachers are giving them the time that you should be giving them. They're giving them the time that their parents need to be giving them, and they will become more detached from their own families because of it. Whatever an education is, it should make you a unique individual, not a conformist. It should furnish you with an original spirit with which to tackle the big challenges. It should allow you to find values which will be your roadmap through life. It should make you spiritually rich. A person who loves whatever you are doing, wherever you are, whomever you are with, it should teach you what is important, how to live and how to die. What's gotten in the way of education in the United States is a theory of social engineering that says there is only one right way to proceed with growing up. And as I have said to you before, it's not one size fits all in any kind of education. Even with me trying to homeschool you, not everything that I do will appeal to you in every video. They won't all be your favorite. There'll be some subjects you won't care for, and so we don't shove them down anybody's throat. You're free to. The idea is to stimulate you to love and good works, to stimulate your mind to want to know something that maybe you would be more interested in. And it doesn't matter to me if it's not something I'm interested in. We can still be friends. But to say that only one size fits all, and you go to a public school or a university, and they will try to make you think that you have all these optional choices in subjects, but actually they're the ones that made the choices, and you get to pick amongst 3 that they made. So you really don't get to choose. It's their agenda. Genius is an exceedingly common human quality, probably natural to most of us. In our secular societies, school has become the replacement for church, and like church, it requires that its teaching must be taken on faith. Well, that is what Sam Blumenfeld said in some of his books, where he said the school is the church, and the teachers are there behind the pulpit, and they're teaching you something different. And also, we notice more and more how much room in your minds and time in your life school takes, so that the church becomes less and less and less. And of course, it's not very desirable because it isn't as intense. And so, I've concluded that genius is as common as dirt. We suppress genius because we haven't yet figured out how to manage a population of educated men and women. The solution, I think, is simple and glorious. Let them manage themselves. It's like I told you last time. I knew children that I just didn't have a hope that they would learn anything, and that their parents were so determined to homeschool them, and the parents could barely read and write themselves, and those kids could read. And those children went far. I mean, the parents didn't teach them everything they knew, but they gave them enough freedom and a few little tools, and they figured things out themselves. Shouldn't we also ask, oh, that reminds me, my friend gave me a word today. You know, you always have to teach me something. If you're going to call me up, I want to know something. She gave me a word. She said, homeschool children are autodidactic. Autodidact. I can't, is it AUTODIDACT? So you can look that up. Okay, and it's like you give them just a few tools, and then they'll learn more than you ever hoped to learn. And sometimes they'll look at my children, and they'll see what they become, and they'll say, oh, you know, my daughter always liked to do house plans and architecture, and she had a pad of graph paper, and she's always walking around taking notes on the house and measuring things with measuring tape everywhere she went. And people would think, well, I couldn't homeschool, you know, because they would look at what she was doing and think that I taught her that. So they would say, well, I couldn't do that. But this is what they become when you just give them a few tools. You don't have to know about architecture for them to tap into it themselves. And one of my grandchildren flies a plane. Ooh, his mother must be going crazy. But she never taught him to fly a plane. He just read about it, studied it, went to classes, and found out about it, you know. But you should never look at that and say, well, I could never homeschool my children. Shouldn't we also ask ourselves what the consequences of the scrambling to provide the most of everything to our children in a world of fast dwindling resources? Well, I'm afraid homeschoolers fall into that trap too. They scramble to provide everything, most of every subject, treat him, what's that poem by Nixon Waterman? Teach him to take of every known subject a dip and a dab. And we don't need to do that. You just need these basic things, how to read and how to write, and you can do it because there's 26 letters of the alphabet and 44 sounds, and it's not a big secret. People have learned how to read forever before even the public schools existed, and public schools did not come over with the Mayflower, and they're not in the Ten Commandments. Independent study, community service, adventures and experience, large doses of privacy and solitude. That's really, really important, the large doses of privacy and solitude. So now, as a homemaker, you're going to see what a benefit this is, that you've got work to do, you've got things that need to be done, and then you'll sit down for a while and go through your pile of reading material, and how much that solitude and quiet can revive your body and mind. And how we've forgotten about that and filled our lives so full of noise. And as homemakers, I think we're more efficient if you sit down for a little bit and make yourself a list. Even just making the list balances your mind and takes away some of the anxiety. Large doses of privacy and solitude, 1,000 different apprenticeships, the one-day variety or longer. These are all powerful, cheap, and effective ways to start a real reform of schooling, but no large-scale reform is ever going to work to repair our damaged children and our damaged society until we force open the idea of school to include family as the main engine of education. That's right. At home, see, we interact. The younger interact with the older, and we all learn together. And when you take them away and put them in a classroom with kids their own age, you're taking away a great resource there and isolating them from the language of their parents, the expressions of their parents, and the figures of speech, and you're taking away their culture and creating a new culture. Make no mistake, says, if we use schooling to break children away from parents, and make no mistake, that has been the central function of schools since John Cotton announced it as the purpose of the Bay Colony schools in 1650, and Horace Mann announced it as the purpose of Massachusetts schools in 1850, we're going to continue to have the horror show we have right now. The primary goal of real education is not to deliver facts, but to guide students to the truths that will allow them to take responsibility for their lives. That's why I never took books and said, oh, you read this book and answer the questions at the end of every chapter. Books were just laying there for interest. The main thing was to learn to think, to learn great truths, and to take one little part of a verse of the Bible and learn how to sift through it and meditate it and see if you could get a deeper, several meanings out of it. And you don't have to be a brilliant scholar to do things like that. In the end, you don't even have to do that. If you love them and they feel and they are happy in their homes, and they can see that you are dedicated to your home, they're going to have a lot more confidence anyway because of their mother. Good things happen to the human spirit when it is left alone. The homeschooling movement has quietly grown to a size where 1.5 million young people are being educated entirely by their own parents. Last month, the education press reported the amazing news that in their ability to think, children schooled at home seem to be 5 or 10 years ahead of their formally trained peers. I urge you to examine in your own mind the assumptions which much lay behind using the police power to insist that once sovereign spirits have no choice but to submit to being schooled by strangers. School is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it. I should know. It's also a 12-year sentence for the parents. The poor parents are subject to 12 years of exhaustion, getting up really early in the morning, packing lunches the night before, making sure they have, helping them to buy their school books. And it used to be you could go and get, the school books were just used year after year, and now you have to buy your own. But just the whole system keeps the parent enslaved to coming and going from the schools, or preparing the child for the next day, making sure his clothes are ready. It's exhausting. It's a 12-year sentence for the parents, too. This was once a land where every sane person knew how to build a shelter, grow food, and entertain one another. Now we have been rendered with permanent children. It's the architects of forced schooling who are responsible for that. Okay, so here's 3 things we can do at home as homemakers, even if you don't have children, even if you live alone. Know how to build a shelter, grow food, and entertain one another. Now, I don't think I could build a shelter. I can build a sheet tent outside with clothespins, but know how to do something of this. Grow food and entertain one another. And of course, as homemakers, we know the Bible says that we are supposed to show hospitality. And so these are things that we can do to be free, know how to do these things. As more people are being home now and becoming homemakers, I think they're learning this, all things that they can do by themselves and not be dependent on the entertainment industry, the media, the education establishment, and the government for how they're going in life, or what the way they're traveling in life. You could just use the Bible the same way and use it as the path to take and say, okay, now I see here it says that I'm supposed to show hospitality. Well, I guess I'll have to learn about that. So then you get on this wonderful web that we've been gifted with in our era, and you figure it out. Or you go and find some old books like I've been reading to you, and you figure it out. Or you might read that good character is self-control, and so you want to find out, well, how would I get self-control? And so you read about how to do things that you don't want to do. Like Emma said, there's a grim job to be done. And, tackle that messy drawer, that big box of papers, in spite of, that's what Homemakers Radio is for. So you've got something to listen to, and you don't have to watch it. There's nothing to watch. I have so many favorite things I like to listen to, but unfortunately some of it you have to look too, and that slows me down. And that was the purpose of Homemakers Radio, something to listen to while you did some of these things that you need to do. Or you might read in the Bible that we're supposed to glorify God in our bodies and not to be conformed to the world. And so you ask yourself, okay, how can I be better groomed, and how can I do my best and look my best? And you might want to look at that. Like, for instance, one of the things that I like to watch when I'm resting is all these different hairstyles from people in different nations, like Kyrgyzstan and the Caucasian mountains, and just and their clothing. Of course, I love fabrics, so I'll go and look at their costumes and their clothing. And so there's so much, that we could do. The lesson of report cards, grades, and tests is that children should not trust themselves or their parents, but should instead rely on the evaluation of certified officials. People need to be told what they are worth. You see, that's just terrible rotten, isn't it, to have a report card? Because if you get a bad report card, it'll just stay with you your whole life, and you'll believe it. And you don't realize that's just a little institution over there that decided to hold sway over everybody, and decide that they'll decide what your worth is. And so in homeschool we don't have report cards because throughout the day we interact with our children and we guide them gently into the things that they must do. And then at the end of the day we'll say, okay, well, today you learned how to watch out for your little brother and not make sure he doesn't get hurt on something that you've left out. And we've learned to respect each other's personal possessions, and we've learned to keep our hands clean, and we've learned a few table manners, and you've all done very well, so we're going to move on to the next thing. And so you give them encouragement, Individual, family, and community are, by definitions, expressions of singular organization, never of one right-way thinking on the grand scale. Children and families need some relief from government surveillance and intimidation if original expressions belonging to them are to develop. Without these freedoms have no meaning. I feel ashamed that so many of us cannot imagine a better way to do things than by locking children up all day in cells instead of letting them grow up knowing their families, mingling with the world, assuming real obligations, striving to be independent and self-reliant and free. It is so sad. Of course, most of us, our only reference to education was public schooling. We thought that's how you did it, So some of us, when we first began homeschooling, brought back the misery that we went through, or we thought, that was the way you would do it, and learned quite quickly that wasn't what it was all about. And pick up a 5th grade math or rhetoric textbook from 1850, and you'll see the texts were pitched then on what would today be considered college level. The continuing cry for basic skills practice is a smokescreen. I don't think we'll get rid of schools anytime soon, certainly not in my lifetime, but if we're going to change what's rapidly becoming a disaster of ignorance, we need to realize that the institution schools very well, but it does not educate. That's inherent in the design of the thing. It's not the fault of bad teachers or too little money spent. It's just impossible for education and schooling to be the same thing. The obligation to amuse and instruct myself was entirely my own, and people who didn't know that were childish people, to be avoided if possible, certainly not to be trusted. Work in a classroom isn't significant work. It fails to satisfy real needs pressing on the individual. It doesn't answer real questions experience raises in the young mind. It doesn't contribute to solving any problem actually encountered in life. The net effect of making all schoolwork external to individual longings, experiences, questions, and problems is to render the victim listless. School is about learning to wait your turn, however long it takes to come, if ever, and how to submit with a show of enthusiasm to the judgment of strangers, even if they are wrong, even if your enthusiasm is phony. Is it any wonder that Socrates was outraged at the accusation he took money to teach? Even then, philosophers saw clearly the inevitable direction the professionalization of teaching would take, that of preempting the teaching function, which in a healthy community belongs to everyone. Schools teach exactly what they are intended to teach, and they do it well. How to be a good Egyptian and remain in your place in the pyramid. So this is called from Goodreads, and it was quotes by John Taylor Gatto. And but let's get back to the homemaking, because I know not all of you have homeschooling on your mind, and not all of you have children, and some of you, your children are gone. So we want to talk about a few other things. And I said I probably wouldn't stay here as long as I normally do. But I would like to say that if you can get up in the morning and feel happy. Now, we've been programmed to be tense all the time, especially now with the way the government is acting. We get up and the tension starts to come. And the other day I decided I would do some reading that had nothing to do with today's world, just an old book that I had read before, and I wanted to read it again. And I woke up happy and free, and I missed. Do you know that I had been so programmed with anxiety in my life for so long, from all the stuff that goes on in the world, and from any kind of problem, and that I woke up happy, and I started to worry about what was wrong. Like, it was such an unfamiliar feeling that I thought, uh-oh, where did this come from? I tried to investigate how it got that way. And most people are so scrunched up with anxiety. It's affecting their internal organs. It's affecting their bodies. And so I will try to find a link to some of they're not really exercises. They're just breathing and stretching and things that relieve stress. But I think the best thing to do to relieve stress somehow is to get it off your mind, is to realize that those people that you're stressed over, the government that you're stressed over, is going to give you nothing. And as a matter of fact, they can take nothing away from you that God has already given you. And God has given you the ability to breathe, the obligation to speak, the responsibilities of the home. And we have to do that. We have to pay attention to our responsibilities. And besides making a list of things you need to do, and groceries down here, we also need to make a list of things we'd like to do or have changed in our lives, things that we'd like to learn more about. And when you start doing that, you some of that anxiety about what they are doing goes away. Also, not to pay any attention to it. Sometimes I'll get on somebody's YouTube or somebody's, even Rumble, and it'll come in my email, and I'll scroll up, and I've just totally lost interest in all their hype. I've lost interest in all their reports about what people are doing in the Congress, because what it reminds me of, because it's always outrageous. Some of the outrageous stuff they say reminds me of an old history book we had when my children were little, and it was one of the A. Becca books, World History. I think it was World History and Cultures. And there was a section in there about how, was it Caligula or somebody had his horse admitted to the Senate as a member of the Senate, and just dumb stuff like that. So it's always been that way. But we have a higher code of living in the home, and we produce the mood of the home. And it's very important to be responsive to your family members by acknowledging that they've spoken to you and not giving them a silent treatment. That is the cruelest thing. And and be careful to note what it is you tend to praise and admire about your children or the members of the family. If you only admire them and praise them because they learned something and because it's intellectual, that's not good. They need to be praised and admired because they're good and kind and helpful, and also because they are a human being made in the image of God, and that He brought them into this world. That is enough, isn't it? To tell them that you love them just because they exist, just because they are who they are. Wouldn't you have liked to have been told that? So many of us, I think, grew up with parents that sent us, to the public schools, and then our sense of worth depended on how well we did there. And if we didn't do well in public school, then we'd get in trouble at home too. But this changes everything, because we want to be educated in light of the Scriptures and in light of what God says. And there's enough in the Bible of tragedies and drama that you could probably read the Bible to the children and have enough of a well-rounded school. And but of course, I love books, and we do have to be careful what we teach at home too. But as far as our home goes, even if you're alone, I think it's very important to have yourself a routine that you follow no matter what. Such as I told you the other day, I get dressed up sometimes just because I know I'm going to go to my exercise class, which isn't a class at all. It's just I get my mat out, or and then I have a chart I look at, to do exercises. I just feel so noble. I just feel like that I did something really great. And just because I went to class, just because I did that. And it's the same with any kind of diary or art class that I'm at, or sitting down and writing an answer to a letter or a card. And so I hope that this has helped a lot for getting things done today. I'm going to just look over my notes and see if I missed anything. Also, by the way we live at home, we can feed ourselves encouragement or defeat by the way we live. And if you have done something that you think that is very good, for instance, if you have arranged a certain room a certain way, or you've knitted something, or you've made something, it is really a good feedback because you keep looking at it, this lovely finished project. So I'm going to set aside one day a week just to finish projects, and also one day a week to work in increments in some of the hot spots that I have around here. And Mr. S always encouraged me to fix the house up the way I liked it, because I would probably be in it a lot, and I would be maybe alone in it too, as everyone in the family takes off and goes their various ways, pursuing their businesses. And so that's encouraging too. Give yourself permission to do that. So ladies, I hope that you have a wonderful New Year coming up. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas too. And I still have a lot of my things up here and going to have to take them all down. How do you like those aqua trees in the background? Aqua is my new neutral. And so, and then there's some candles there that I painted. And so that's all I have for you today. And hopefully I'll be able to come more often and find out more good things that you can think about when you are doing your work at home or walking. If you can't walk outside, walk in the house. You'll notice more things. I have noticed some loose floorboards since I have been walking in the house, and I'll need to be paying attention to that. So I hope that you will keep close to Christ, and also, if you care to, you can leave a comment here. If you're new here, please go to the link I have provided and go and listen again on the post, and see some of the pictures and the other things going on around here. So I love you, and I will talk to you later. Bye.